In the 1960s in Britain, if you wanted to hear pop music, you had to press a transistor radio under your bedsheets and hope the BBC had not decided you should listen to dance bands instead. There were no playlists, no YouTube, just the faint crackle of forbidden songs reaching desperate ears. Why did an entire generation risk trouble for music everyone now takes for granted? The answer reveals how British music united a nation before everything changed. Under the covers, the world shrank to the size of a transistor radio. Fingers curled around the plastic case, thumbs spinning the dial, searching for that sweet spot where music slipped through the static. The sheets muffled the sound, but not enough to hide it from a parent passing by the door. Every hiss and crackle became part of the song. Sometimes the signal drifted, and a chorus faded away mid-word, leaving you desperate for it to return. You learned to listen with patience, to catch the first notes of a Beatles tune or the familiar jingle of Radio Luxembourg before the next wave of interference swept in. The radio glowed like a secret lantern. Long after the rest of the house had gone quiet, you lay awake, heart pounding at the risk of being caught just to hear the music they said you shouldn't. The voices of DJs, bright and conspiratorial, spoke as if they knew you were listening in the dark. Each song felt like it was meant for you alone. Sometimes the music was so faint you had to press the speaker right to your ear, the plastic warm against your cheek. You memorized the order of the songs, the way the signal would fade as the weather changed, the thrill when a forbidden track broke through the static. This was how you built your own world, one stolen chorus at a time, long before pop music belonged to everyone. In the early 1960s, the sound of popular music in Britain was shaped not by what people wanted to hear, but by what they were allowed to hear. The BBC held a legal monopoly over the airwaves, backed by the Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1949. If you switched on the radio, you would find the Light programme filled with dance bands, light orchestras, and crooners. Pop and rock records were rationed, not just by taste, but by strict rules enforced by the Musicians' Union and Phonographic Performance Limited, and by a practice known as needle time. Across all BBC stations, only about 5 hours of recorded music could be played each week, barely 40 minutes a day. On the Light programme, which was supposed to serve younger listeners, pop records were squeezed into 2 or 3 hours for the entire week. The rest of the schedule belonged to live orchestras, session musicians, and carefully vetted singers. Rock and roll was treated as a threat to public taste and to musicians' jobs. These restrictions were not accidental. The Musicians' Union feared that too many records would put live performers out of work, so they fought to keep the airwaves filled with concerts and studio sessions. The BBC was cautious and conservative, and it agreed. For teenagers hungry for the latest sounds, this meant waiting days just to catch one new song. If you missed it, there was no second chance. The scarcity was not just about technology, it was enforced by policy and written into every schedule. The result was a musical drought, with pop music rationed and rebellion brewing just beyond the reach of the BBC transmitters. On Easter Sunday, 1964, a new sound crackled across the airwaves. A ship called the MV Caroline, anchored just off the Essex coast, began broadcasting non-stop pop music into Britain. At the helm was Ronan O'Rahilly, an Irish entrepreneur who had grown frustrated with record labels and BBC gatekeepers. He found a way around them, literally, by taking to international waters, out of reach of British law. The DJs on board lived in cramped cabins, working shifts around the clock, spinning the latest singles through storms and seasickness. They called out greetings to listeners from their floating studio, their voices bouncing across the country. Within weeks, 7 million people tuned in, transistor radios pressed to ears in bedrooms, buses, and playgrounds. Radio Caroline quickly became more than a station, it was a lifeline. Soon other ships joined the rebellion. Radio London, Radio Scotland, each with their own crew of disc jockeys, each broadcasting the music the BBC refused to play. The government called them pirates, but to millions of teenagers, they were heroes. This was music without permission, and it sounded like freedom. Top of the Pops landed on New Year's Day, 1964. The first episode went out from a converted church in Manchester, with the week's chart toppers miming or singing live to a studio packed with teenagers. Producers like Stanley Dorfman watched the acts closely, making sure no one went too far. The Rolling Stones once grumbled their way through Let's Spend Some Time Together, a forced rewrite, thanks to BBC censors who would not allow the original lyric. But the show was a magnet. Families squeezed onto sofas, parents sighing or shaking their heads, kids glued to the screen. The next day, everyone at school had seen the same performances. If you were not on Top of the Pops, you had not really made it. The ritual did not end with the telly. By Saturday, teenagers flooded the record shops. 6 shillings for a single, about 30 pence, but a real bite out of a £15 weekly wage. You would queue for a listening booth, jammed in with your mates, spinning the new Beatles or Kinks track twice, if the assistant was not looking. One Liverpool teenager remembered saving for weeks, then carrying his new single home like a trophy. The crackle as the needle dropped was almost as exciting as the song itself. Every record was a piece of the week's magic, yours to keep, played until the grooves wore thin. Saturday night meant the dance hall. The band would strike up the latest chart hits, and the floor filled with teenagers in their best shoes, nerves jangling as they eyed the opposite wall. One regular remembers the ritual. You waited for the opening chords of Satisfaction, then everyone rushed the floor at once. In the corner of every coffee bar, the jukebox glowed. A single sixpence bought you a song, and if you pooled your coins with friends, you could keep A Whiter Shade of Pale spinning for half an hour. The cafe regulars all knew who picked Wild Thing. It was always the same group of mods, grinning as the Trog's 3-chord thunder rattled the saucers. A girl from Liverpool recalls, "We played She Loves You so much the machine jammed. The owner just laughed and reset it." These songs, Puppet on a String, Summer Holiday, Congratulations, became the soundtrack of every youth club, every church hall, every smoky back room. Music wasn't just something you listened to, it was something you shared, out loud, in public, with everyone you knew. For a few coins you could make the whole room sing along. On August 15, 1967, silence fell across the North Sea. The Marine Broadcasting Offences Act made it a criminal offence to supply, advertise for, or even work with the pirate radio ships. DJs, who once filled the airwaves with pop hits, now faced prosecution. At midnight, Radio London signed off with a final farewell. Radio Caroline tried to keep going, relying on loyal fans for food and fuel, but without advertisers, the broadcasts faded. The government called it law and order. For millions of listeners, it felt like losing a friend. The music stopped, and the ships went dark. On September 30th, 1967, a new voice greeted the nation. Tony Blackburn, bright and unmistakable, opened the airwaves saying, "And good morning everyone, welcome to the exciting new sound of Radio 1. The BBC had finally given pop music its own home. Familiar pirate DJs now broadcast legally, spinning the latest singles from a London studio instead of a rocking ship. For the first time, pop was not just a rebellion or a secret. It was on the dial for everyone, every day, with the full weight of the BBC behind it. Today, every song is a private experience, and shared moments are rare. But those 1960s broadcasts proved music can unite a nation in real time. As algorithms fragment our listening, the power of a single song to bring us together may matter more than ever. What do you think?